I am joined now by the leader of the opposition, Senate Minority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. Senator, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Jake.
So let's start with President Trump's inaugural address. He presented himself, I think it's fair to say, not so much as a Republican or a conservative, but as a populist. Take a listen.
Matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people.
During the lunch that followed the inaugural address, you were deep in conversation with President Trump. What did you two discuss, and do you see any areas where you think you can work with him?
Right. Well, first, let me just say about his address. It was populist, but I'm worried he's using populist rhetoric to cover up a hard right agenda. If you look at his cabinet appointments, so many of them are not populists, but hard right. Dr. Price, he wants to end Medicare as we know it. Mulvaney wants to cut even research into health care. DeVos, cut public education. Pudzer, go against protections of labor. So his cabinet is very troubling, and that is actually what I discussed with him. He said, can you move my cabinet along? I said, look, with people who seem to be pretty mainstream, Mattis, Kelly, we're going to approve them quickly. But so many of your cabinet appointees, Mr. President, are quite different than what you campaigned on and even what your speech was about. So I am really troubled that this populist rhetoric is covering up a hard right agenda, which is way, way out of touch with what the American people want and even what Trump campaigned on.
Let's talk about the cabinet. At this point in the Obama administration, President Obama, then President Obama, had 7 new cabinet-level officials confirmed. Trump only, as of right now, has 2. Do you think that you're going to be able to stop some of his nominees, or are you just trying to slow down the process?
Well, let me say this. First, this cabinet is unusually unique and a lot different than others. We call it the swamp cabinet, billionaires and bankers. The number of wealthy people, the number of people rife with conflicts of interest, and the number of people who have disagreed with what Trump has campaigned on is so much more than any other cabinet we've seen. And so that means they need thorough review so they don't have conflicts of interest, thorough review so we know, for instance, is Dr. Price going to try to privatize or end Medicare when Trump campaigned against it? And our Republican colleagues, I don't blame them with this cabinet, have tried to rush it through. Advise and consent does not mean rush it through, ram it through. And they're all going to get, many of them, the controversial ones, and there are 8 or 9 of those, are going to get very, very thorough discussions on the floor. Whether we can beat any of them, that'll be up to Republicans. If Republicans use the same standards they've used in the past, they will be beaten. Mulvaney, for instance, didn't pay a household worker for 4 years. That was enough for Republicans to oppose Tom Daschle, and he never became Secretary of HHS. So we'll see, but we certainly feel that we have to bring to the American people how different this cabinet is, how hard right, how many conflicts of interest, billionaires. And let me just give you one example. The one billionaire in President Obama's cabinet, Penny Pritzker, took 6 months because of the complex conflicts of interest. DeVos and Mnuchin and Ross have far more complicated financial holdings than she did.
That may be true, sir, but it's also true that there are people who will obviously very easily be confirmed who have not yet been confirmed, one of them being Congressman Mike Pompeo, who's been nominated to be director of the CIA. President Trump visited the CIA yesterday. I want you to take a listen to White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer last night.
Saying that the CIA didn't have a CIA director to be with him today when he visited, because the Democrats have chosen, Senate Democrats are stalling the nomination of Mike Pompeo and playing politics with national security.
What's your response, sir?
That's ridiculous. Number one, we have never had a CIA director confirmed on the first day. Number two, there are very capable people watching over the CIA, and in fact, I told Vice President on Wednesday, I said, look, we need to have some debate on Pompeo. Why don't you ask Brennan to stay? He was willing to. They refused. And third, and most important, Pompeo is going to have huge, huge power. And there are issues that have been very vexing to the Congress, the old debate between security and liberty. So to have a debate on him for a few days, the vote is going to be Monday night, is what should happen. And I would say to all of my Republican colleagues that instead of spending their time on this issue, why don't they talk about what the president did at the CIA, standing on sacred ground in front of the names of many who had given their lives for this country. He talks about, you know, how many people showed up at his inauguration. President Trump is now president. He's not campaigning anymore. And instead of talking about how many people showed up at his inauguration, he ought to talk about how many people he's going to bring to the middle class. Our Republican colleagues, if a Democrat had said this, so much against the tradition of deep, hard rock republicanism that Ronald Reagan established, they'd be all over him. If our Republican colleagues would start talking a little bit about some of the problems when President Trump goes off in this direction, maybe he wouldn't do it anymore.
So far, just sticking with the cabinet for a second, so far, sir, you have voted for two of President Trump's nominees. You voted to confirm General Mattis for Defense and General Kelly for the Department of Homeland Security. Which other Trump nominees do you plan to support?
Look, there are some that are not controversial. I'm going to wait and hear the debate. But this week, you'll see a few more put into effect. But again, advise and consent does not mean ram it through. Some of these nominees came before the committees, before their conflict of interest papers were in, before it was cleared that they wouldn't have conflicts of interest. Many of them have controversial positions. And for 8 or 9 of them, there's going to be thorough debate, maybe even a few more.
Will you vote for your colleague, Senator Sessions, as Attorney General?
I've already said I'll oppose Senator Sessions. He has a record on immigration, on voting rights, and on civil rights that is so against what America's all about.
Will you vote for Steven Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary?
I'm studying his record. I haven't taken a position. I'm going to wait for the debate on the floor.
Are there Trump nominees that you already have made up your mind besides Sessions, in addition to Sessions, whom you will oppose?
Well, I certainly am really dubious of about 8 of them, because so many of them have conflicts of interest and positions that goes against the grain. You know, I await the hearings and I study the hearings, the floor debate, but there are 8 or 9 that I'd have a very hard time voting for, maybe even a few more than that.
Can you tell us who they are? I imagine one of them
No.
would be Mr. Pruitt for EPA head.
His positions against clean air and clean water would turn America back for decades. It's again against the American grain. I haven't made final decisions on any of these people, but I'd find it difficult to vote for him.
Let's turn to healthcare. President Trump signed an executive order on Friday that he said would have the effect of easing the burden of Obamacare. What's your understanding of what this executive order will mean?
Well, let me first say this. They have so many problems with their repeal and replace. It's interesting. If you would have told me that at this point in time, Democrats would be united and on offense and Republicans would be divided on defense when it comes to ACA or the cabinet for that matter, I would have said, you know, you're wrong. But it's true. And we've had a very strong 2 weeks because they're in such a pickle. They don't know what to do. They can repeal, but they don't have any plan for replace. And the president's executive order just mirrored that. They said, do good things, not bad things, and do things that are that comply with the law. That's meaningless. And it's because they promised everybody they were going to repeal. But now they've seen all the good things in ACA, the 20 million people covered, pre-existing conditions covered, kids 21 to 26 get their parents' health insurance, women treated equally as men. And they know that to repeal these things without finding a way to do them, to undo them, would be catastrophic, substantively and politically. So they're in a total pickle. And this regulation does really nothing.
Let's turn to the Supreme Court. You recently said that you are absolutely willing to keep open that 9th seat, the Scalia seat on the court. Take a listen.
It's hard for me to imagine a nominee that Donald Trump would choose that would get Republican support that we could support. So you're right.
And so you would do your best to hold the seat open?
Absolutely.
You would do your best to hold the seat open.
If the
Here's
nominee,
the question.
yeah. Let me just say this. What I said on that show was if the nominee is out of the mainstream, we will do our best to keep the seat open. Let's remember that of the last 4 Supreme Court nominees, 2 nominated by a Republican president, 2 by a Democrat, they had bipartisan support. What I said, you didn't show it on the air there, is if the nominee is not bipartisan and mainstream, we absolutely would keep the seat open. I'm hopeful that maybe President Trump would nominate someone who is mainstream and who could get bipartisan support. We shall see. But if they don't, yes, we'll fight it tooth and nail, as long as we have to.
As you know, for the last 4 months, President Trump has had a list of 21 potential Supreme Court picks. He worked with the Federalist Society on the list. He says they're all conservative judges. Are you saying that not one of the judges on that list of 21 is in the mainstream?
I haven't studied the records of those 21. I'm not going to comment on a potential nominee. I'm going to wait to see who the president nominates. My only plea to him, hope, nominate a mainstream person, not someone way out of the mainstream.
I want to ask you about your appearance at the presidential inaugural on Friday, because you spoke, and I don't know what you could hear. I was farther away from President Trump than you were, but there was a lot of booing. Let's run a little excerpt of your speech.
Whatever our race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, whether we are immigrant or native-born, whether we live with disabilities or do not, in wealth or in poverty, we are all exceptional in our commonly held yet fierce devotion to our country.
Could you hear the boos, and were you surprised by them?
Well, I couldn't hear much. I was told about it afterwards, but it was amazing. That speech given with any other president, with any other audience, would have been cheered. It's not controversial language to say we're all Americans. It's not controversial language to reach out to others who might not be exactly like you. And so the fact that people didn't like it speaks poorly of them, not of what I said in the speech. Even when I said we should have rule of law, I was heard booed. When I talked about Sullivan Ballou, a great Civil War patriot who gave his life to his country and said there are some things greater than ourselves, there were catcalls. Wow, what kind of situation is that? And you know, I have to say something. The president-elect ought to lead. When his followers do things like that, he ought to speak positively about being inclusive and being American. The speech should have been aimed at bringing people together, as Ronald Reagan's speech was, as Franklin Roosevelt's speech was, Democrat and Republican. So this is the fact that saying these things, which are usually accepted by just about every American, met the displeasure of the crowd, doesn't speak too kindly of that crowd.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York.
I should say, Jake, the one thing I should say, just the people who booed. I'm sure it wasn't most of them.
Just the people who booed. Got it. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.